Alright everyone, we start off today talking about Roberta Jacobson, who is actually Biden's border coordinator. Well, she's calling it quits. At the end of the month, she'll be gone. Because the border crisis has spiraled completely out of control. It is the main thing dragging, by the way, Biden's approval down underwater. They say, well, he's a little bit over water at the moment. He's still afloat. Now, push polls aside, I think he's somewhere in the low 40s at this point. I can't imagine that the average American's actually gullible enough to support the job that Biden's doing. Fuck, he's trying to get one of the Waco agents to head the ATF right now, Chipman. I'll be talking about that separately today or tomorrow. He's a fucking loser. But anyway, this is hilarious. Link in the description. Archived, of course. But first and foremost, remember, I make video content on 4 other sites. If you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment down below, and you should definitely join me on one or more of those sites, because keep in mind, I make 2 videos a day that are exclusively there and aren't even on YouTube. Usually spicier content, subjects that are verboten on YouTube that big tech doesn't want you to discuss unless you're Dr. Fauci or whatever. And so you can get the true skinny there more so than YouTube. Like, YouTube has been displaced as the main place for alt media, for alternative like journalism and analysis anyway. It's becoming increasingly useless for these purposes. Twitter too, Facebook. I'll be talking about Zuckerberg in his pandering to Islamists, actually, in an alt-tech exclusive later, so stay tuned. Get your daily clank. This is great, because finally Biden is suffering the consequences for something that initially his administration isn't the progenitor of. It's actually the Obama administration. Funnily enough, who was the vice president at the time. You see, what happened under Obama was that there was no real effort to defend the border. The border basically for 8 years stopped existing. This despite the fact that when he was running for election in the first place, he's like, well, immigration's fine, but people have to come here legally. They need to know that we'll defend our border. And then he did absolutely nothing. The reason is this. Neoliberals and neocons agree in spirit on one really, really big thing, which is that they want a class of serfs in the United States. They can pay taxes, but they can't vote. They can't do the things normal people do. They're quasi outside of the legal system, and what happens is that they use it every 4 years as political leverage. Well, we got this big problem. There's millions of people illegally here. So they have DACA, deferred action, and so forth. They kick the can down the road. They're always promising these people and their family members, who in many cases are citizens and so forth, don't worry, I'll handle it, but we can't do it right now. We'll have an 8-year path to citizenship, says Joe Biden, for DACA recipients. No, you won't. 8 years from now, it still won't be imposed. They'll still be illegally in the country, and you'll still be deferring action on it. It was funny, because DACA, in the executive sense, Trump wasn't even able to get rid of it through executive order. The Supreme Court literally prevented him from using his executive power at the time, which would have finally solved the issue and been like, look, we're just going to get rid of this and start deporting people that are illegally in the country. Oh no, says the Supreme Court, you can't do that because reasons. Very, very interesting judicial overreach in that particular case. Keep in mind, the Supreme Court is generally reluctant to do things like that. Could it be because all of their political allies, the Bushes and the Obamas of the world, all of these people make huge amounts of money from corporations that illegally employ illegal aliens? Of course they do, under the table. Who's going to say anything about it? Some bureaucrat comes in, oh, there's a bunch of illegal people here. Yeah. Here's 10 grand. Now shut the fuck up. Corporations do this all the time. It's funny to see people on the left, by the way, trust corporations when they're either lying about illegal immigration or they're pretending to be woke. If they're making money, then they're evil. But if they're censoring people for wokeness, then they're good. They're hashtag resist. Jeff Bezos, the Rebel Alliance leader, and stuff like that. It's hysterical how their mindlessness never ends. But watching his border coordinator, Biden's, quit within only a couple of months of actually being on the job, what a stunning rebuke of Joe Biden's border policies. Again, remember, supposedly it's not his fault. Pelosi, did you see Pelosi the other day? Oh, well, he was left quite a mess on the border, so we're doing the best that we can. No, he wasn't. The border was fine. You had new barriers going up. You had the retrofitting of old barriers. You had an attempt to put in electronic monitoring, seismic monitors and stuff like that, which even Joe Biden, keep in mind, Open Borders Biden, who thinks Beto O'Rourke should be on board for gun control and shit like that. You know, the throw the border open, tear down this wall dude from Texas. who tried and failed to unseat Ted Cruz at his finest hour and basically is a complete embarrassment and a joke to anyone who's, under the age of 50. That Beto O'Rourke, the one with the midlife crisis, the really strange, bizarre one, that Biden, even he thinks, well, we got to plug the gaps in the border. Now, again, and I analyzed this a couple days ago, he's not talking about physical gaps. Now, he's not going to complete the border wall. That'd be a hilarious optics fail. Oh, yeah, I guess Trump was right after all. Whoops, sorry about that, leftists. No, that's actually talking about, like, electronic monitoring. In other words, spying on people. Those cameras aim in both directions. You know that, right? If you live within a mile of the border, you're basically in no man's land, I suppose, at some point. Black Hawk helicopters and shit. Even he's doing that. The border crisis, even the press, finally and very belatedly is like, well, it still looks like kids in cages to us, except now the cages are super packed during a pandemic. Yes, exactly. There wasn't such a problem under Trump. Yes, there were detention facilities for kids in cages and shit. Whatever they're calling them now. It really depends on who the president is, I suppose, and what month it is. It was there. And there were overcrowding incidents in some cases, but you didn't have, 1,700% capacity in just one of these facilities in Donna? And then you have Biden's people there harassing, like when Ted Cruz goes there, because he's from Texas, they can't stop him from going in. They're trying to get him to, like, a race footage that he took and shit. And it's like, come on, dude. For months, they hid it from the world. They literally hid the conditions there. Veritas getting chased away. They had to use a helicopter and fly overhead to get, like, aerial footage of one of these overstuffed facilities. And you've got, 1,000, 2,000% capacity at most of these places. You've got the reinstating of catch and release. And to top it all off, the cherry on the cake to show just how bad the problem is, Biden taking the extraordinary step of actually repealing a Trump-era EO, one that was relatively popular, by the way, that would allow communities to determine whether they're able to take refugees or asylum seekers. Of course, they're not. They have no legal right to claim asylum. We've got a safe third country in effect now. Honduras, not necessarily the nicest place, but people from Point South, technically they shouldn't be coming to the United States under asylum laws. They're not legally due asylum in the United States. It's no longer necessary. People from the Yucatan, I suppose, or Belize, I suppose, and that's basically it. You've got a huge problem at the border, and you can't possibly fault Trump for it. He had stopped this problem from being a problem. People weren't coming across the border. It fell to like a 20-year low. Now it's at a 20, 30-year high as far as the number of people coming across. Biden is uniquely responsible for this. And I think that it's unethical, by the way, too. I think that it's blatantly unethical to essentially insinuate to people, yes, we're open for business, go ahead and come here. And then again, that icing on the cake of not even allowing communities to determine whether they're capable of settling people, temporarily or permanently. You've got some town with high unemployment and no jobs even for people who speak fully fluent English and have degrees and shit. You have some master's student is flipping burgers in order to make ends meet, double shift at Burger King. And you're going to take, hundreds or thousands of people who don't even know anything about the culture necessarily, aren't going to fit in necessarily in the culture, who will become a subgroup. Really what you'll see is segregation. Have you ever looked at U.S. cities and demographic maps? They're highly segregated. It's a lot less, by the way, in small-town America. There it's like people don't care as much because there's less stress, less crime, there's less animus between groups of people. If you look at any significant urban metropolitan zone in the United States, it is highly segregated. That's why you have stuff like Chinatown or Little Soho or something. People of different ethnic or geographic backgrounds have amalgamated around people that are closer to them in linguistics and culture and so forth. This happened especially among immigrant communities. So you have Little Italy. Now, of course, nobody, some person of broadly Italian heritage moves in. Nobody says, oh, there goes the neighborhood or whatever. But still in an urban context, there's still that tendency because of social ties, because of cultural ties, in some cases language. What you'll see is that these people being forcibly resettled, improperly and illegally in some cases, throughout the United States, will form subcommunities. They'll do so out of necessity. Economic necessity, language necessity, they'll have social cohesion. The problem is that this can also cause problems with the population that is native to that region. There will be a lack of understanding between these groups of people. What Biden has done is create a situation where 40% of females who make the trek on the skeleton trains and shit like that will be sexually assaulted, and about a quarter of them will be raped on the way to the United States. They get to the U.S., they get detained. Then they become serfs, essentially, who can pay taxes and have a job, but they're not allowed to vote. They're never going to become legal residents because they didn't come in properly, and because they'll kick the can down the road because they want them to be slaves. And then they'll put them in some random community in the U.S. that they're not used to, with no social ties. Among other people who are part of that group, there might be a cartel member among them. There might be a trafficker, a coyote among them. How the hell are you supposed to know? And meanwhile, you're handing kids off to random people who say, oh yeah, I'm his relative, I'm his uncle, so yeah, hey, he's mine now. Oh yeah, I'm going to drag him into the basement, beat him to death, but Biden's responsible for this. It was much more humane. If you want to be humane, close the border, attack the cartels and the drug war, and then kick the socialists out of Central America so that there's something other than a banana republic economy there so that people don't have to flee their country. Why don't you drop a bunch of guns and leaflets saying spread the word about capitalism there? That'd do a lot better. That's about all. Peace out.